Greetings, YouTube. I think I first became aware of the concept of animated skeletons in Jason and the Argonauts with that awesome stop-motion animation done by Ray Harryhausen. The man was a genius. In the past couple of weeks, I was watching a number of beta playthroughs by Tales of Lumen. Yeah, Sven. And he was playing this sometime late last year, I think. I don't think it was this year, I'm not sure. And skeletons play a fairly big part, as do zombies. And the skeletons reminded me how aesthetically pleasing I find skeletons, both on film, in video games, and as an element of role-playing games. I just like skeletons in my games. I prefer them to zombies in many ways. First of all, because they're a lot more attractive, though fantasy zombies don't bother me. It's the zombies that you see in quote-unquote real films that really tend to get to me. But it's also because skeletons are more magical to me. Because a zombie has got muscles and ligaments and things like that, so you can say, yeah, it's an animated corpse, but all the bits that run a body are still present. Whereas on a skeleton, those bits are all gone. The only thing holding that thing together is magic. And that's just cool. Occasionally you get a little glowing in those empty eye sockets, but a lot of time you don't. It's just a skeleton that's been animated by magic. And I've used animated skeletons and corpses in the past, animated by an animate object spell, to confuse the heck out of parties when they think it's an animated undead, and it's not. They're trying to turn it, and they don't turn it. Makes them think it's really powerful. And I just find them cool. Now, I've used them, of course. In fact, I think it was back in first edition, may have been Arduin that introduced me to the idea of using dragon tooth bags, bags that had teeth in them. You buried the teeth, and they grew into skeletons, very much right out of the film of Jason and the Argonauts. And I used them in my last 3rd edition campaign, my old full-blown campaign. When the player characters encountered the race of the Eleti, E-L-E-T-I. It's from the book Mythic Races. They were also written up for the Dragon Star universe, both of which are excellent third-party books. I recommend them. And the Eleti are a race of actual walking, talking skeletons. They have real eyes inside their eye sockets, but the rest of them are completely skeletal. And they breed by, like, spalling off one of their bones, and, like, it becomes a little person and grows into a larger skeleton. And the player characters encountered them because they were shifted to another prime material plane. And this prime material plane, over 1,000 years in the past, magical plague had wiped out all mammalian hominids. All of them. And as soon as the person died, like 24 hours later, the skin would slough off, and they would rise as an Eleti. Through no fault of their own. They did not do this intentionally. So suddenly find themselves, you know, these hunted, hated race because, you know, your brother dies, and the next day he stands up as a skeleton, a completely different person, with a new personality, essentially a babe in the world. So there was a lot of chaos in the last days of that society as everything began to shift. And then the characters were there, and they were the first hominid, mammalian hominids the Eleti they encountered had ever seen. They're like, wow, we thought you were legends. We didn't think you were real. And the Eleti they encountered, he was a druid, actually snuck a bone into their possessions. So when they got back to their prime material plane, while their caretaker was, like, emptying their gear bags and, you know, packing things back up for the next adventure, she finds this bone. Well, actually, at that point, it was actually a skeletal fetus, which slowly begins to grow until eventually it stands up as a fully formed skeleton and looks around like, hi, who are you, kind of thing. So that was kind of cool. And I actually used them I had a favorite non-player character. His name was Otto of Otto's Oddities. I've spoken about him before, I think. I've used him in a number of campaigns, both science fiction and fantasy. And Otto had a lizard man skeleton which he had severely modified. He had hired someone to get him a complete skeleton of a lizard man, a complete body. Had the skeleton stripped down to skeleton. Then he magicked it to be as strong as you could. I mean, reinforcing it so it's a great hardness, a lot of hit points. The skeleton itself did, before he ever animated it. And then he had it magic so that it was completely immune to fire. 100% immune to fire. Then he plated it in mithril. And the last step was to put in retractable claw blades and tail blades. And then he animated it into a skeleton. So he had this very loyal servant, very powerful loyal servant, that had built-in weapons of blades and claws. I think it still had a bite attack because it was a lizard person. For the most part, it just stood in his house as a statue. He used it as a coat rack. People thought it was just a piece of the decor until he needed it to do something, or it was guarding his home while he was sleeping. I loved Otto. He was a lot of fun to play. But I just really like skeletons. And I'm intrigued to hear how players out there or GMs out there have used skeletons in their own game. What have you done that was interesting with animated skeletons?